You know that Qatar now has the dubious honour of having been attacked by both Israel and Iran. The last time we were talking about Benjamin Netanyahu's sort of unilateral decisions to launch attacks upon sovereign nations, it was indeed his attack upon Iran that detained us. And Iran has itself attacked Qatar. Qatar have tried to sort of cast themselves as peacemakers in this process. And so it's hard to exaggerate the significance of Netanyahu's decision to put them in the crosshairs. And it's so horrible now. Well, it's been horrible since October the 7th, of course, but it's so intractable, and it would seem inevitable, this constant ticking of the death toll and this incremental impunity that Benjamin Netanyahu seems determined to enjoy. How many people, for example, who remain understandably and correctly committed to the existence of the modern state of Israel, if they had been asked at the end of 2023 if they felt that bombing Qatar or bombing Iran or not moving heaven and earth to ensure the release of the hostages, in fact attempting to kill the people with whom you could the only people with whom you could negotiate the release of the hostages. How many would have supported these paths that Netanyahu has taken them down step by step, pace by pace, until you're left with either, the starkest of choices. Either you abandon your support for this regime and, I don't know, atone for or apologise for all that you have helped visit upon the people of Gaza and beyond, or you double, triple, quadruple down and pretend that it is in any way justified, what is now unfolding. Even Donald Trump. And, of course, it's Wednesday, so he could say precisely the opposite tomorrow when it's Thursday. In fact, he might say precisely the opposite by tea time. But even the United States, that's not even Donald Trump, let's get it right, has expressed unhappiness at what is unfolding, and I think understandably some focus of media in this country, focus of attention in this country, moves to the imminent arrival of the Israeli president and his meeting later today with Sir Keir Starmer, and it could be that. I'm knitting too much together into one place here, but I think that you can see the wisdom of this line of inquiry. I hope you can. If you can't, you know what to do. You can ring me up and tell me. But there are a number of reasons why the visit of the Israeli President, Isaac Herzog, is controversial. He has claimed that there are, and I quote, no innocent civilians in Gaza. In the immediate aftermath of October the 7th, he insisted that an entire nation is responsible. He was also photographed personally writing messages on shells that were later deployed in Gaza, where over 50,000 people have now been killed, and where a plurality of international genocide scholars, I think, I don't know if anyone has counted all of them, but the votes keep coming back and the testimony keeps being published, stating that Israel is indeed continuing to commit genocide. So, even if there are still question marks over that conclusion, which in terms of international law there are, writing messages on shells that are going to be deployed in the killing of civilians seems to me to be a slightly odd path to go down. But it seems also to be a path that Benjamin Netanyahu has now blown up. Because even yesterday I was hearing, I felt, compelling arguments that you need to welcome this character, even with his comments, his hideous comments, actually, about there being no innocent civilians in Gaza. That is a precursor to genocidal ambition. If you're saying every single person there is guilty, then you are creating circumstances for genocide, I think, inevitably. And if the argument is that in order to ensure a ceasefire, to bring about a cessation of hostilities, to stop the killing, to stop the ethnic cleansing, to stop the genocide, if you are of the view that is what is unfolding, then you need to keep the lines of communication open. And history has taught us that you have to negotiate with everybody in order to bring about peace. I think of Northern Ireland often when I turn my attention to matters Middle Eastern, and I don't know what the equivalent would be today. If Margaret Thatcher had thought or had information that senior members of the IRA were holed up in a a very specific corner of Derry or Ulster or Belfast, could she have bombed the whole street? Would she have enjoyed support if she'd bombed the whole street? In the aftermath, perhaps, of the Brighton bombings, would there have been an appetite in this country for parts of Northern Ireland where Republican terrorists were being sheltered to be destroyed? Because you were targeting exclusively the terrorists, and if anybody else got killed in the meantime, then hey-ho, that's showbiz. I don't know. I'm just always searching for parallels, historical precedents, and I'm running out now. I've been running out for some time because there would always be consequence. There'd always be action. There'd always be international intervention to pause or stay the hand of a leader determined to do what? Can you even answer that question now? What is he determined to do? To protect Israel at all costs? It doesn't seem to be going very well, certainly in the context of international public opinion. I don't think the modern state of Israel has ever been less popular than it is today. And that's a tragedy. There are people who don't like the idea of a two-state solution, and the one-state solution they envisage would involve the end of Israel as we know it. I think those people are profoundly wrong and often quite disgusting. But goodness me, the support that you need to sustain is being hemorrhaged by the actions of one man, of Benjamin Netanyahu. And the idea, I mean, again, I'm throwing a lot at you today, but I promise it all slots together like a jigsaw. Because, again, if you look at the history of hostage release, I think that of the 148 who have been returned alive to Israel, it may have gone up overnight, but 140 were released and 8 were rescued by the Israeli military. You've also had several bodies of deceased hostages returned by Hamas, often that too a consequence of negotiation. And the massive majority of those released alive were set free as part of 2 ceasefire agreements, and those ceasefire agreements were negotiated by Hamas leadership. So if you're still clinging to the notion that Netanyahu is in any way motivated by seeking the release of the hostages, you'd have to be able to answer the question of why 140 of them, or a massive majority of 140 of them, have been released as a consequence of negotiation and ceasefire agreements. Why would you then seek to kill the people with whom you conduct those ceasefire negotiations? I think this is a really important question. Again, I'm just a gob on a stick. Sometimes I see things that I think are really interesting and insightful, particularly when a story is developing live in front of us, and I have the great honour of being in your ear live, and sometimes I get it horribly wrong. But that seems to me to be a huge problem for anybody claiming, oh no, we have to negotiate, we have to invite the Israeli president, despite his hideous comments about innocent civilians in Gaza. Spoiler alert, he doesn't think there are any. Presumably newborn babies would count. I don't know. Is it 1 month old, 2 months old that they become culpable, they become guilty, they become fair game for the missiles upon which he scrawled messages? That we have to keep the lines of communication open because it's the only way that negotiations can be successfully completed. But then his boss bombs the negotiators. His boss bombs the negotiators. And anybody paying attention, and this isn't an opinion, it's counting, can tell you that negotiated ceasefires have brought about the release of many more hostages alive than military intervention. I think the figure rescued by the IDF currently stands at 8. So even that argument, which I haven't really heard, I think Nick had a caller today making that argument, but I mean, I don't even know if they believe it anymore. The argument that Netanyahu is in any way motivated by the release of the hostages when his every action, and many of the families of hostages, of course, agree with this, but his every action does the opposite. I am shaking with fear, said the father of one hostage still held. It could be that in these very moments the Prime Minister has actually assassinated my Matan. Why does he insist on blowing up any chance of a deal? I'll say that again. Einav Zangauka, who is the father of one of the hostages still held there, Matan, wrote on social media, "I am shaking with fear. It could be that in these very moments, the Prime Minister has actually assassinated my Matan. Why does he insist on blowing up any chance of a deal?" But you get some self-appointed expert on social media or on phone-in radio claiming that this is all being undertaken in order to ensure the release of hostages, the massive majority of whom have only been released as a consequence of negotiations with the people that Netanyahu has just tried and largely failed to kill. Are you still with me at the back? So, what is the point of meeting the Israeli president if his boss is trying to kill the negotiators? 0345 6060 973. What is the point? Is there, and that's question number one. Question number two is, watching what you're watching now and noting even Donald Trump saying that the latest action is, I mean, he wouldn't use a word like unconscionable, I don't think, but that is the issue that he's dancing around. So even Donald Trump can't bring himself to support this. There's still dispute over whether or not he supported the action in Iran, whether or not he knew before it in advance or he pretended that he did, because the alternative would have been even more embarrassing. But it was nothing like the success claimed by both Israel and by Donald Trump. So this notion that you have to keep the lines of communication open surely falls to smithereens when the other side in the negotiations tried to kill the people that they're supposed to be negotiating with. Doesn't it? Well, I mean, what is the point of rolling out a red carpet today for the Israeli president when yesterday the people that we are, or the people that they are supposed to be negotiating with, were targeted by the Israeli regime? That's a question. I don't think it's a rhetorical question. There may be answers that you can provide that I currently can't see, but who's going to negotiate now if you've tried to kill them? I think one of the negotiators' sons may have been killed. I mean, how does that help the hostages? Oh, we would like to reopen negotiations. You just killed my boy. I can't, man alive. So is there any point whatsoever in maintaining diplomatic relations, or whatever you want to call them, with an administration that, I mean, I don't even know what the words are anymore. When you knit all of these things together, the simple question that if you want to negotiate a ceasefire, you have to negotiate with these people. They are the only available people to negotiate with. And you are trying to kill them, which tells you everything you need to know about Netanyahu's genuine desires for ceasefires, for settlements, for hostage releases even, perhaps, and for peace. Spoiler alert, he has no desires for any of those things. Have I got this right? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It's surely absolutely indefensible now to argue that there is any point whatsoever calling for a negotiated settlement. And if Netanyahu has killed that stone dead, if he has, to use the words of one of the fathers of a hostage still held in captivity by, or in Gaza, probably by Hamas, he has actually assassinated my son. Why does he insist on blowing up any chance of a deal? Actually, let's answer that question. Let's pay this man the respect of treating his question as if it is not rhetorical. Why does Benjamin Netanyahu, to quote the father of a hostage in Gaza, one of the 20 still believed to be alive, he would like to know why Benjamin Netanyahu insists on blowing up any chance of a deal. Why do you think Benjamin Netanyahu insists on blowing up any chance of a deal? That is question number one, absolutely front and centre. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. Why does Benjamin Netanyahu insist on blowing up any chance of a deal? While some well-meaning, but some, I think, now probably not well-meaning supporters of his pretend to believe, or have somehow persuaded themselves, that his actions are justified by a desire to release hostages. The dad of a hostage is saying, why has he blown up any chance of a deal? That's question number one. Why has Benjamin Netanyahu chosen to blow up any chance of a deal? 0345 6060 973. And does this latest atrocity, does this latest attack upon an ally, of Western powers, a sovereign nation, does this latest attack make a complete mockery of the argument that there's any point in having lines of communication open, in having negotiations ongoing, or indeed in hoping that jaw may actually overcome war? What is the point of talking to Netanyahu's administration when he's made attempts upon the lives of the people he needs to talk to ensure the sort of ceasefire that has proved to be the single most successful way of securing the release of hostages? God, that's bleak. I knew where I was going this morning, but I didn't have all of the strands knitted together. That's so bleak. And not just for the families of the hostages, for the civilians still being ethnically cleansed in Gaza and possibly in the West Bank, for people in Qatar now worried about their security. How can anyone now defend this? But crucially, how can anybody claim that there's any point whatsoever in negotiating? 0345 6060 973. Simple question, actually, for once on this programme. And inevitably, it's not my question, it's the question posed by Einav Zangaka, who asks, why does Benjamin Netanyahu insist on blowing up any chance of a deal? Has he actually assassinated my son?